Mr. Putin is restoring his status quo. Where is Russia's new Poseidon nuclear submarine actually aiming? On the initiative of the President of Russia, the whole country was choosing the final name of the Status 6 project. More than 7.5 million Russians took part in the All-Russian People's Choice vote, which lasted 22 days. The name Poseidon had the most votes. Before the advent of Poseidon, the Pacific and Atlantic Oceans were a reliable buffer zone for the United States. But now, everything has changed. Putin has flipped the game. The waters on both sides of the North American continent are turning into a source of danger. The West Coast, where the Juan de Fuca lithospheric plate dives under the continent of North America, becomes especially vulnerable. Up to 30% of the U.S. economy and almost the entire IT industry are concentrated in this region. Poseidon is capable of depriving the United States of economic and political power and throwing the country back decades in economic development with just one strike. It seems that Russia has another weapon that can force the leadership of the United States and NATO to consider its position. This is what Putin has been striving for 20 years. Or do the Americans have something to oppose the god of the seas? First, let's talk about the Poseidon's abilities and what the United States is prepping against it. And then, let's simulate the god of the seas attack. In fact, Poseidon is a robot-controlled deep-sea torpedo, which is capable of carrying a charge. Judging by the characteristics of the new unmanned submarine, the name of the main sea god from ancient Greek mythology is used here for a reason. Judge for yourself. Poseidon is equipped with a nuclear reactor, which makes the submarine's autonomous navigation time practically unlimited. So Russian nuclear unmanned submarine is capable of carrying out combat duty for about an eternity. The nuclear power plant does not require refueling, and there are no personnel on board, which means the human factor is minimized. Imagine that there is not a single living soul left on the planet, but Poseidon continues to move through the deep ocean waters under a curtain of sea snow from dying plankton. And only sleepy Melanocetus and other inhabitants of the sea underworld can keep the god of the seas and oceans company in its endless voyage. By the way, the maximum depth for this nuclear submarine is 1,000 meters. The sonar in the bow section reacts to changes in the relief. The maximum speed of the Poseidon is 200 kilometers per hour. It's phenomenal. This is about 3.5 to 4 times faster than any known submarine at the disposal of the US or Russian Navy. For example, the Seawolf multi-purpose nuclear submarine of the 4th generation, the most expensive in the history of the US Navy, can go at the speed of about 35 knots, which in terms of land values is about 65 kilometers per hour. The maximum immersion depth of the Seawolf is 600 meters, but the operating depth is naturally smaller, 450 to 580 meters, depending on the modification. Russia's Yasen and Severodvinsk 4th generation nuclear submarines have approximately the same characteristics. Even promising Husky-type 5th generation submarines will be inferior to the Poseidon in terms of speed and diving depth. But most importantly, Poseidon can be armed with a heavy-duty torpedo, which has a nuclear charge with a capacity of up to 100 megatons. To understand the destructive power of such a warhead, let's take a look at the figures. For example, the most powerful nuclear explosion in the history of mankind occurred during the testing of the 20 megaton Tsar bomba at the Sukhoi Nos test site on Novaya Zemlya Island. The explosion power was 58.6 megatons. The blast waves circled the planet several dozen times. The windows in the houses shattered 700 to 800 kilometers away from the epicenter of the explosion. Fortunately, Soviet nuclear physicists were prudent enough and afraid to test the Tsar bomba at its full design capacity, which was 101.5 megatons. The leader of the USSR nuclear project, headed by Andrei Sakharov, rightly feared that the Earth's crust would simply not withstand and crack from an explosion of such power. The consequence of a deformation of this magnitude cannot be predicted by any scientist or research institute. Meanwhile, the Poseidon is quite miniature. It's 20 meters in length and 1.8 meters in diameter, but this is enough to carry a powerfully deadly charge. At the same time, its compact size makes it difficult to detect the submarine by the enemy's bearing. A dirty bomb could be an alternative weapon for the Poseidon. It is a torpedo with a warhead that, during an explosion, produces an extreme radiation background in which all the electronics fail and any human dies. So the Poseidon is capable of being both a doomsday weapon and a retaliation weapon. Today, not a single weapon in the world can resist this Russian submarine. The Status 6 project emerged as a response to the US missile defense, hence the name of the project is Status. Russia sought to restore its status following the Mutual Assured Destruction Doctrine. The meaning of the doctrine can be summarized in one phrase: the first one who uses the doomsday weapon will be destroyed by the retaliation weapon. This is not about the military command or the presidents. It's about the complete destruction of the aggressor country. Nuclear parity is the main and only way to keep the peace on the planet today. However, the American strategists perceive Status 6 as another attempt to create an inexpensive and effective tool against American aircraft carriers. In this area of arms, it is really impossible to keep up with the United States, neither economically nor technically. Therefore, strategic opponents of the United States are forced to be creative. At the initial stage of the project, Russian developers also assured that the Poseidon AUV would be able to resist the US aircraft carrier fleet. The combat mission was to get close to the grouping of enemy ships at a maximum depth of 1 kilometer and launch. One torpedo, with a 100 megaton charge, is enough to send dozens of escort warships to the bottom together with an aircraft carrying cruiser, and this is the entire aircraft carrying strike group with its personnel. However, in the process of creating and simulating combat missions for an underwater drone, new advantages of Poseidon appeared. The unmanned submarine can come up off the coast of any continent and attack the coast or naval bases of the enemy. In addition, Poseidon is capable of performing reconnaissance functions, as well as making diversionary maneuvers and participating in cover operations if it is required by a combat mission. Conducting reconnaissance missions is facilitated by a legal conflict. It turns out there are simply no legal obstacles to the use of Poseidon-type submarines in the territorial wars of another country in peacetime. After all, the uninhabited, unmanned Poseidon has no analogs in the world so far. This is not a bottom-based apparatus or a nuclear submarine. Poseidon, without weapons, can even be interpreted as a research vessel controlled by a robot. Excellent cover for reconnaissance. But so far, the Western military is skeptical of the Poseidon. First of all, the experts do not believe in the declared speed of the submarine. The tests planned for the autumn of 2020 were postponed to 2021, so there is no real data on the characteristics of the deep-sea drone. Second, the Poseidon's stealth is questionable. High speed implies a turbulent wake, which is highly visible to sonars. In addition, there is simply no room for an acoustic protection system on board, and in the sneak mode of up to 8 knots per hour, the main advantage of the Poseidon, speed, is lost. The advantage of the depth is also not the key. To detect the Russian underwater drone, the Americans should slightly modify their noise-finding systems, taking into account the abnormal depth. Finally, Poseidon cannot do without an uninhabited nuclear submarine, which serves as a carrier and a launch pad. So far, Russia has the only submarine capable of carrying Poseidon. It is the Belgorod 5th-generation nuclear submarine, which is about to be handed over to the Russian Navy. Actually, the main testing was postponed due to the delay with the Belgorod. It is not easy for such a colossus as the Belgorod nuclear submarine to hide in the ocean. The U.S. Navy's Anti-Submarine Warfare, ASW, operates from the seas adjacent to Russia, from the exit from the bases. Any movement or maneuver of the Russian nuclear submarine outside the home base is tracked and followed by the American submarines. It turns out that the Seawolf nuclear submarine settled in the Norwegian Tromsø at the end of summer 2020 for a reason: to be closer to the routes of Russian nuclear submarines. In addition, the American Project Hammerhead is in the final stage of implementation. We are talking about an underwater stationary uninhabited complex that includes anchoring, movement, detection, control, and communication modules. The main characteristics of the Hammerhead are an acoustic detection system and a homing 324mm Mk-54 torpedo. Hammerhead is capable of lying on the seabed at a depth of 900 meters and waiting for the right object for months. The target can be an enemy watercraft, including the nuclear submarine. The network of dozens of Hammerhead complexes along the main routes of submarine traffic can serve as reliable protection against Poseidon as well. If the Russian underwater drone is a super torpedo, then the American Hammerhead is a deep-sea supermine. At one time, the tactics of placing sea mines brought the U.S. victory over Japan. During World War II, the Allies sank 266 Japanese ships of various purposes. Not a single soldier died in this confrontation. This is a serious efficiency. The speed of the Mk-54 torpedo is twice as low as the declared speed of the Poseidon. However, if you don't chase the Russian underwater drone, but counter it on a collision course, then the project looks serious. The Hammerhead complexes will be endowed with the ability to exchange information. It is much easier to resist the Russian submarine together. To seed the seabed with Hammerhead complexes, the United States requires a special submarine. These include the new Orca submarine developed by the Boeing Corporation. It is an unmanned submarine, but with a conventional diesel-electric propulsion system. The project is nearing completion. The price of each unit is about $10 million. No big deal. This means that there can be no doubts about the successful implementation of the project. However, the United States has one geological pain point that independent experts have forgotten about, and the U.S. strategists are stubbornly silent not to sow panic among partners. And this pain point is located off the west coast of the United States. This is a geological anomaly in the Cascadia subduction zone. This region is part of the Pacific Ring of Fire, a boundary where one lithospheric plate goes under another and plunges into the Earth's mantle. The interaction of the plates of the Earth's crust result in active volcanism and strong earthquakes. In light of Poseidon's insane weaponry, this fact takes on a particularly ominous meaning. We are worried about the Juan de Fuca lithospheric plate, which goes under the North American continent. The last earthquake in 1700, triggered by the Juan de Fuca movement, turned the west coast into uninhabited territories. The first American settlers came here after the tragedy. Therefore, the mega-earthquake is known only from Indian folk legends. However, the anomaly has not disappeared. The frequency of its activation is 300 to 500 years, so modern civilization has not yet felt the full danger of Juan de Fuca. With the help of a thermonuclear explosion at a depth, it is possible to provoke the movement of lithospheric plates. It is known that under certain conditions, a thermonuclear explosion will provoke a tsunami up to 500 meters high. Russia has such calculations at its disposal. This is enough to practically destroy the entire infrastructure of the coast. If the Juan de Fuca lithospheric plate becomes the epicenter of a thermonuclear explosion, a catastrophic earthquake with a magnitude of over 12 points will occur in addition to a tsunami, and it can change the terrain far from the hypocenter. In this case, it is almost impossible to predict the consequences and simulate the likely destruction. Probably, the Americans are hoping for the clauses of Additional Protocol No. 1 to the Geneva Conventions of August 12, 1949, adopted on June 8, 1977. One of the points reads as follows: in the event of any armed conflict, the right of the parties to the conflict to choose method or means of warfare is not unlimited. The use of weapons, projectiles, substances, and methods of warfare capable of causing unnecessary damage or unnecessary suffering is prohibited. Another paragraph of this protocol prohibits impact on the natural environment. However, for some reason, there is confidence that in a critical situation, the opponents will ignore these arguments. Putin promises his citizens that if they die, they will go to heaven, and the enemy will be destroyed in any case. Those present greeted these words with applause.
И мы как мученики попадем в рай, а они просто сдохнут.